Hello there, welcome to The Comments, the collaborative project by Espresso Global and Ukrainian media. I'm Elena Solodovnikova, and it's a great privilege to me to be joined by Georgian independent journalist Temur Kighuradze. Hello, Temur.
Hello, thank you so much for inviting me to your blog. Yeah.
I would like to start with the basic but crucial question. How did it happen that Georgians had allowed a pro-Russian party to become the ruling majority? What point were you turned to the wrong avenue? Because Georgia could have chosen another way for its development.
Yeah, it depends how much time we have. We can talk about it for hours and hours and hours. But basically, to put it in a nutshell, Georgia became obviously a pro-Western country. It chose like a pro-Western foreign policy, starting around late 2003, 2004. Before that, we already had established some ties with the Europe and North Atlantic Treaty Alliance organization. But in 2004, it became clear that Georgia is clearly a pro-Western country. This course of Georgian foreign policy was supported by majority of Georgian population. All the surveys, all the research starting from 2004 to this day, they show that vast majority of Georgian population, over 75%, still supports Georgia joining the European Union and NATO. So, in 2012, the ruling party, the United National Movement, which was led by then President Mikhail Saakashvili, they are losing the election. They are losing the parliamentary election. And it's very important to know that Georgia is a parliamentary country. So parliament decides everything. So parliamentary elections are the most important elections in the country. There were so many reasons why they lost the elections. There were a lot of violations of human rights, especially during the last term of Saakashvili's government. A lot of people did not like what he was doing. They appreciated all the reforms, but they did not appreciate how much Georgian population had to pay for them, and we did pay for with human rights violations and etc. etc. So there was this person who appears in Georgian public space, Mr. Bidzin Ivanishvili. He is the richest Georgian in the world. His net worth is around anywhere from $4 to $7 billion, depending on different sources. He was never a public person. He was always a very private individual. We only had two photographs of this guy. We knew that he is there. He had good relations with Saakashvili. He was funding some of the projects of the previous government. Something happened in their relations. He decided to join the politics as the opposition. So with his basically unlimited financial resource, he managed to gather all the politicians who were not happy with what Saakashvili's party was doing in Georgia. And among these people, there were a lot of very respectful people, respectful politicians, clearly pro-Western, pro-European politicians who were defending human rights, defending freedoms and democracy in the country. And they won the elections in 2012. Georgian Dream never announced or never proclaimed themselves as the pro-Russian party. They always claimed that they are pro-European, pro-Western party. They said, yes, we need to start a dialogue with Russia. We need to have better relations with them. However, they said, yes, our goal is freely clearing Europe. And this message resonated well with the Georgian public. However, gradually, year by year by year by year, a lot of people who were respected, who were smart, who were intelligent in their party, in the alliance, started to drift away from there. They quit the party, they quit the parliament, they left different positions in the government. And it was a very, very gradual shift. It kind of became more obvious maybe a few years ago after the full-scale invasion started in Ukraine, that something is not really going on the way we wanted, because verbally Georgian government supported Ukraine. Members of our parliament even went to Ukraine in the first month of invasion, went to Bucha to pay their respects to the victims of Bucha genocide, of Bucha massacre. However, then the relations started to become more and more tense. Right now, we don't even have an ambassador to Ukraine. We have only an acting representative of Georgian government. And more and more Russian money appeared in Georgia. More and more Russian citizens appeared in Georgia. Some of them were fleeing from the war. Some of them were fleeing from being drafted to the army. But it became obvious that the government is basically started to make their money from those who are coming from Russia. So I would say that and from the start, for us, for journalists, for experts in policy making, it was a signal that they are trying to play both sides. They're trying to gain some money from Russia, but still keep a respectful and respected relations with the West, with the Europe. And it reflected. We got visa-free travel to Europe the same year as Ukraine and Moldova did. We got accepted as candidates for European Union. We achieved the same a bit later than Ukraine did, but we still achieved that, and it was a big holiday in Georgia that all the government officials congratulated us. In 2023, the government introduced the law on foreign agents. It was a copy, basically like word by word copy of the same law that Russia has introduced some years ago, that basically started all, like basically put in stone everything that Putin was doing to Russia when he got rid of all the more or less sane people in Russia who were defending democracy and human rights. And it was a part of the process because the same law passed in Kyrgyzstan around the same time. The same law was passed in Kazakhstan, if I'm not mistaken. The same law was passed in Hungary years before that. And as we all know, Hungary is basically the biggest and the only ally of Russia in the European Union. And Georgian people could not tolerate. Georgian people went on the street. We started to protest. Thousands, tens of thousands of people went in Georgian capital, in other cities, in other towns, and situation became very tense.
Yes, I wanted to clarify. Sorry, I wanted to clarify a little bit about the law, about the foreign agencies. The law was vetoed by the president, and Venice Commission of the Council of Europe strongly recommended that Georgia repeal the law. Will it help to postpone the implementation? What are the mechanisms how to block it, at least temporarily?
Yeah, no, well, we are talking about the current law, but this law was first introduced a year ago in 2023. That's why I'm saying it's not the first.
It was absolutely different. What was the difference between them?
Absolutely the same law, only the title changed. Before that, it was actually called the law on foreign agents. And then people started to protest, and Georgian Dream said, okay, you don't like this law, we're not going to pass this law. And they voted against their own law. And they said, we will never bring it back because it hinders with our European future and you don't like it. So forget about it. This year, 2024, they brought it back. They only changed the title. Now it's called the Law on Organization who Promotes Foreign Influence. Same thing, just
very tricky, very tricky.
Yeah, you have to have a PhD to understand it. Yeah. Yeah, so the law has passed already. The parliament has adopted this law with 3 hearings. That how Georgian law works. Our president, Madam Zurabishvili, has vetoed the law. It's not really a problem for Georgian Dream. They have a majority in the parliament. They can overrun this veto. It's not an issue. It only drags it a little bit in time. However, the law, if they want it, they will adopt this law. Everyone who has ever heard of Georgian was our partner, starting from, I don't know, from Lithuania to the presidents of Germany, France, to the State Department of United States, to all of our partners in Europe and the West said, this law is insane, please don't adopt this law. The protests have been ongoing. We had the largest number of people protesting in the street in the whole history of independent Georgia. We had never had so many people out in the streets in like 33 years of our independence. Yeah.
And what is potential risk may be caused by the adoption of the law of foreign agents, except of the delays of European integration and other else?
Well, it's a huge risk. Like the European Union already said that with this law, you will never become part of Europe. The negotiations with Ukraine is starting very soon, as we understand, should have started for Georgia as well. But with this law, there are going to be no negotiations. We might lose the free regime in Georgia. But that concerns foreign policy. For our interior policy, it's even worse because not only it prevents basically all the international organizations, all those who promote democracy and human rights in the country to operate and work. Okay, maybe most of population don't care about like organizations who promotes a democratic values, but it's also agricultural programs and projects. It's healthcare program and projects. It's projects that support the rural communities in Georgia, support our villages, support the regions of Georgia. It's millions and millions of dollars, and a lot of organizations have been working on. Like Georgian people will be affected by this law. There are gonna be a lot of downsides to this law. Not only that, it also allows this incarnation of this law is even worse than the one that was in 2023 because now it allows for surveillance on those who are suspected to be foreign agents. It means if an independent journalist conducts an investigation on certain corruption or abuse of power in the government, they could be listened by the state security, by law enforcers without court, without a decision of general prosecutor. It's going to be all admitted in court, which makes this job not only harder but next to impossible.
Yes, I think this is absolutely trash. But probably yesterday, several EU countries, Estonia, Netherlands, Czech Republic, and Sweden, are publishing the sanctions against Georgia, including the suspension of visa-free travel to the bloc in response to foreign agents law. What is your stance on this offer?
It's a very tricky question because from what we understand now, the US and some European countries have announced that there are going to be sanctions against a member or members of the government who are promoting this law, and mainly Bidzina Ivanishvili himself. And he has a lot to lose. A lot of his assets, a lot of his money is in the West. And other government members whose children, as usual, right, as we know it from Russia, their kids are studying and living in Europe or in America. Of course, they trash Europe verbally, but they send their children there. Of course, like we all know it. However, it also hinders our European integration. A visa-free regime for Georgia is not only to go and have a beer in Prague or go in Venice to ride the canals. Tens and hundreds of thousands of Georgians, they live and work in Europe. They live in Germany, they live in Spain, they live in Italy, they live in Greece, they live in Poland. Their family members are traveling back and forth. They're sending money back and forth. We have special conditions for trade with Europe. If it's going to go away, it's going to affect our economy very hard. And simple people, not just government member, will be affected. Our economy has already seen the effects of that because the rate of our national currency is slowly dropping. It means the prices are going to increase, and prices are very high in Georgia. We have same prices as most Eastern European countries, if not even more expensive.
Really?
Georgia is a very poor country. Yes, Tbilisi is more expensive than Warsaw, for example.
Oh.
And so, yeah, a lot of simple Georgians will be affected because their relatives there is not a single family in Georgia. I may be only slightly exaggerating, but there is not a single family in Georgia whose relatives or friends are not in Europe or in the United States working and sending money back. So Europe for us is not just like a castle in the sky, it's something that we know. We travel there, we work there, we live there. And so everyone's going to be affected. So my stance on it, yes, it's going to be very hard for every single Georgian. It's going to be very hard for every single Georgian citizen. I wish it could only affect the politicians, but sadly it won't.
Yes, you told about the castle in the sky, like Europe, but from your perspective, isn't the general concept of you seem outdated, that rather sluggish? What are the alternatives to the Eurasian expansion, the another joining country with each other?
What's the alternative? I don't want to even to say it aloud what the alternative is. The alternative to European market, the alternative to Europe is another union. That's a Eurasian union. And maybe our
There are no
politicians are confusing.
alternative to it?
No, there is no good alternative. The alternative is getting better ties with Russia. And that's what's most likely is going to happen. We will need to replace European market. We will need to replace European money, and Russia is always there to help. Always there to help with that. And we know there are certain negotiations that are being conducted with that. And Russia has praised this law. Russia has supported this law on all levels, starting from insane pseudo philosopher Dugin, who said, I'm so proud of Georgians for this law, finishing with Minister of Foreign Affairs of Russia, Lavrov, who said directly, this law is not Russian, but we're going to be very happy if Georgia adopts it. So, yeah, most likely Russian money, there's going to be even more Russian money in Georgia that will lead to even more sanctions, because unavoidably Georgia will join gray exports, gray inputs via Russia, and sadly some of it might be directed against Ukraine, because we have Black Sea ports and we have access to certain trade routes that can bring goods that Russia desperately needs. And it's going to affect, again, it's not only going to affect Ukraine, it's going to affect us, because then our bank's going to be sanctioned. And it's going to be even worse for us. We tried to get rid of Russian influence for decades, and we managed to, if not fully get rid of Russian influence in economy, I mean, but at least to supplement it largely by European or American trade. And now we are getting back there. We are like drug addicts, like heroin addicts, getting back to the Russian needle.
Oh.
We cannot do it. We cannot do it because it's the generations, the future generations are going to be affected by it. And once you get back into Russian orbit, they don't let you go. They never let you go. At least they don't let you go peacefully.
Yeah, well, but could you elaborate at what extent Georgia economically depend on Russia at this moment? Do you depend on from them energy, from their energy, or something else?
Not really in the energy. We do get some gas from Russia, but it's not major. I think it's around 10 or 12% of gas that we get. Most of our gas comes from Azerbaijan, as does our oil. So we are not going to freeze if Russia cuts this gas. We don't really need that. We have our own electricity. We are good with that. We depend on them in trade. So food, mostly wheat. Georgia doesn't have our own wheat. We cannot cover ourselves with that. So food is very important. Trade, our goods. So famously, wine, famously, like mineral water, famously. Some of the agricultural products, they all go to Russia, as well as certain metal compounds that Georgia produces go to Russia, and this will only increase. Right now, if you go to any Georgian supermarket, more than half of products that are sold there, from, I don't know, ketchup to bread stuff, they are made in Russia. And it takes me a lot of time to find products. Now we became experts in barcodes on products. So now, like, it takes me, I don't know, an hour just to find goods that are not produced in Russia, and which are actually way more expensive than the Russian goods. So again, it's gonna affect a lot of people. And it's gonna increase in value.
I wanted to back to the more global question, and in October, Georgia will hold parliamentary election. What are your anticipation about this election? Will it stand a chance to be held in a democracy way?
Again, it's a very interesting and very tricky question. Before Georgian Dream, our ruling party, introduced this law, they could have won this election without massive falsification. The thing is, Georgian opposition parties used to have a very small rating. They were not popular because the young people, they were so disappointed with the opposition as well as the government that they did not care about Saakashvili, they did not care about any other party. There were a lot of guys and girls who are protesting right now. They're 20 years old. They were 8 years old when Saakashvili left the government. They do not remember him. They don't want to know about him. So Georgian Dream could have easily won this election. Maybe not easily, but they could have gained like respectful 50%, 51% of the votes. Right now, the opposition is revived. Right now, the question is not, do I like this party or not, but does this party support Georgia's European choice? Does this party support Russia? So right now, Georgia Dream actually created a problem, an issue for themselves, how they're gonna win the elections. And the only way for them to win the elections fairly is to falsify the elections, to buy the votes, to affect those who are monitoring elections. And this law is a wonderful tool for that. This law is a wonderful tool to put pressure on those organizations who monitor the elections. Those organizations who are counting the votes, who are going to demand the recount of the votes in certain problematic regions. Most likely, they're not going to let certain international observers in. So it creates additional problems. It's going to create even more civil unrest because even more people going to go in the street. And now government uses all sorts of violence and oppression. They're straight using tactics of Yanukovych from Maidan in 2013, 2014, when he brought people in civilian clothes, titushki, as you know them in Ukraine, that are beating up all sorts of people, starting from the politicians, ending with just kids who are like 17, 18 years old, both boys and girls. Some people are fired from their jobs because of their political affiliations or just things they said on Facebook. And that's a very Russian thing to say. And if the elections are falsified, I mean, I cannot predict what's gonna happen, but it's gonna be bad. For now, like I do not really have an optimistic prognosis of things are gonna happen because I think it's gonna get even worse. It's gonna get even more violent, and there will be gonna be two options: either it's gonna be a lot of violence, or people are just gonna leave, like it happened in Belarus, for example, right? When they had massive protests, and then everyone who could left the country.
But do you really believe that in Georgia, rallies can be suppressed by the police, like in Belarus?
I don't believe it's going to be as... I don't want to say that it was easy in Belarus for Belarusians. Of course, it wasn't. It's not going to be easy. But if there is enough violence, I don't know. I don't know. I don't have an answer. I don't have an answer. And if anyone tells you they have an answer, they're lying.
Yes, and by the way, your politicians, for example, your prime ministry, have already begun to frighten people with the Russian narrative that you wanted that you will be like a Maidan to let Ukraine to the war. Do you want the war and nothing else? What can you say to this ridiculous thesis?
The answer is very simple. The only country that really wants war right now is Russia. Being friends in Russia increases the risks of war in our country. Again, just what I said previously, right? If we are becoming very close friends with Russia because of our government, okay, they might do it for a few years. They're going to be a next generation who will never want it, right? And the only way to get out of Russia is through war. And we have experienced this, right? We have many wars in Russia. The last war was in 2008, and the former president of Russia, Dmitry Medvedev, stated directly that this war happened because Georgia wanted to become a NATO member. It was like the real reason why Russia invaded us in 2008. So it means like if Georgia will ever want to go back to Europe, will ever want to go back to NATO, it's going to result in another war. And now Russia is more prepared. to do this war. They are more capable of, if now they are occupying 20% of our territory, next is going to be 100% of our territory. Nobody believes that Georgia, that some politicians, and they are saying some insane things. Our government is saying that like there is a global war party, certain Masons or secret organizations that are ruling the world and want to bring Georgia into war. And some people are buying it, most people don't. But nobody realistically can expect Georgia to start a war with Russia. It's just we are just incapable. Georgia is smaller than Kiev. Georgia is 3.7 million, with a very optimistic view on our population, and nobody wants Georgia to get into the war. We just want to become a free, independent country. And look at Moldova, right? Moldova is even smaller. It's even weaker, with a weaker economy than Georgia. And Moldova is doing, if not great, they're doing good, right? Maria Sandu has a very clear objective. She said, we want to become part of Europe, but we will not be part of the war. And Europe said, okay, and we're going to support you. So what prevents Georgia from doing the same, right? We need to support Ukraine, and we are supporting Ukraine. Many Georgian fighters are fighting in Ukraine right now. But of course, we are not going to join the war. And if our government states that that's the reason of all that, they're lying. They're just lying. That's it.
Precisely, but when I talk with military experts, all of them predicted that the next country which will be attacked after the Ukraine is the Baltic states, it's Moldova or somebody else, but not Georgia. But what do you think? What is the reason Russia will again started restoring the influence in Georgia by military? In what case they will do that?
Georgia is crucial for Russia. Georgia is very important for Russia because of the Black Sea and because of Armenia. Armenia used to be the closest ally of Russia in the Caucasus, and there are military bases, Russian military bases in Armenia, and Armenia doesn't border Russia. They don't have a direct border with Russia. They only border Russia through us, through Georgia. So getting supplies to Russian bases or getting more soldiers in and out of Armenia is very complicated for Russians. They need a direct access. This access goes through Georgia. That's first. Black Sea ports are crucial. We know that Black Sea fleet, Russian Black Sea fleet, is getting smaller every week. So there are already negotiations that part of this Black Sea fleet is going to be stationed in Abkhazia, in the occupied territory. It's occupied by Russia. But their ports are very small. So Georgian controlled port of Batumi or Poti, they are much larger. They provide better infrastructure for them. Like, it's a theory, right? I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm saying that's why Russia might want this. And again, Russia wants to make sure that Georgia will never become NATO member, will never become member of the European Union. And I think, and when you are dependent economically on Russia, you would not want to do anything that will make Russia angry. But that's not how independent countries work. The independence of the country means you can make your own decisions, your own choices. And we are losing that. And this law is just a beginning. This law is only a small piece of the puzzle. There are already other laws, and there are going to be way more different laws, many different laws that are going to be affected us. Right now, we have a second law that is being adopted as we speak. It's the law on offshores that allows basically anyone with a lot of money to bring this money from offshore accounts in Cayman Islands or in Panama to Georgia without paying any taxes or without being checked by any kind of revenue service. The situation now is so bad that it's funny. Like, it's funny how quickly it became so bad. And what kind of people keep their money in offshores who want to move them to Georgia and not to Dubai and not to somewhere else, right? Russian businessmen, Chinese businessmen, who don't want to answer where this money came from. Do we really want it in Georgia? I don't want it in Georgia because it increases the risks of our proper banks, of proper businessmen, of proper large-scale businesses to be sanctioned again, because who wants to have business with a country that allows gray money, black money, dark money to be stationed in Georgia. And then who will become our trade partners? Russia, China, North Korea, Iran. Our prime minister is in Iran right now as we speak.
This is very smart decision from Russia to stay nuclear weapon in Belarus, to left their money in Georgian banks. Okay, great. Great for them.
Not great
Probably.
for us. Not great for us. Unfortunately, it's not great for us. Yeah, and the situation is escalating so quickly that like by the time our conversation is out, there gonna be like there may be something new, even more insane or crazier thing that happened. And again, the situation is unpredictable. Absolutely.